welcome to another episode of the Outside Insider podcast here on Philly Sports Network with myself, Liam Jenkins. I hope you've all had a great week. And the thing is, many of you probably did. And then last night happened. That sucked, didn't it? The thing is, this show was meant to be very positive. We were going to talk about how amazing the Eagles' win was over the Giants again, how they bounced back from having their backs to the wall, that it was very circa 2017. And then something happens last night. And no, I don't mean the 1975 dropped their album and made me an emotional mess, although that is also true. The Cowboys, they had to do it, didn't they? They just had to go out and make life that extra bit stressful. And went and beat the New Orleans Saints. Now for the Eagles, it had been a very quiet week up until that point. Season was saved, life is good, running game established, no noise about Mike... Okay, there was noise about Mike Rowe, that's happening at every street corner. But in terms of injuries, in terms of gossip, inverted hot takes, or weird radio chatter, none of it. It was just a quiet week. Apart from the people that somehow are still calling for Nick Foles to play over Carson Wentz, they never cease to stop, really. But then last night happens. And the Cowboys go in, they beat the Saints, and all of a sudden, all that hard work for the Eagles is undone. Frankly, if I'm brutally honest, I think that was an ultimate ending. It's prolonging the inevitable if it didn't happen. This team is not a playoff team, in my opinion. And although that win was phenomenal against the New York Giants, there was no Saquon Barkley in the second half for the most part. And is that sustainable when you've got the Rams, the Texans, and two divisional opponents? It was always going to be a case of the Eagles having their work cut out for them. And without talking too much about the game itself, because I think it was in one spot, a defensive masterpiece by both teams. I think both defenses played brilliantly well. Maybe not Eli Apple. We'll exclude him from that debate. That was a dreadful performance. But it reminds me very much of, if you're in a situation, we've all gone through breakups and stuff like that. I mean, this is a probably 1975 induced take now. So if you've not listened to the album yet, you're going to have to. But if you go through a breakup, right? And you do that thing, you constantly check on the other person. And maybe they start moving on. And they start seeing different people, going on dates or whatever it may be. And it's got to get to you a bit, because prior to that point, you were doing good. You were on yourself, you were getting back on your feet again, you're finding yourself. You see that, it knocks you down a peg. And that kind of puts the nail in the coffin that the connection you've got with that person, that's done, right? But then there's that silver lining of, well, I'm finding myself again. They've gone and rushed into something straight away. So it's not going to last. It's not going to be anything like super serious, right? It's probably going to be a little bit damaged, or that they're not properly over the situation, whereas you're just keeping yourself to yourself, doing you. We've all been in a situation where you're one or the other, everyone heals differently, but there's that, I guess, moment of serenity where you're like, alright, cool, if you go and do that, I'll keep doing me. And this is teenage level stuff. Like, this is when you're 15, and you go into school, and the girl the next day is with that, the hunky guy who plays rugby, or I guess it'll be football in America. And you're like, oh, well, okay, fine, cool. But he's probably going to mess you around a bit, and it's probably going to suck. So, thank you next, Lamal. That's what 15-year-old Liam would have definitely... See, Ariana Grande just stealing songs from 15-year-old Liam. But that's what I like in that game too, because you know what? The Cowboys may now seal the NFC East, or if they don't, somehow that's a complete choke job. But if they do, fine. Great. Cowboys go into the playoffs. How far are they going to go? Really? They're hot now, sure, but how far is this Cowboys team going to go? Because I made a comparison earlier on. I said Dak Prescott reminds me of Brock Osweiler. Good quarterback when everything around him is perfect. The minute it's not, fades, disappears. Chokes, fumbles, throws interceptions, has tremendously woeful ball security. That's the guy you want to lean on in the playoffs? I mean, his playoff record isn't exactly great. Let's look at the one time they did get in. Dak Prescott, in his last 23 games, has thrown for 250 yards 6 times. 6 times in 23 games. 250 yards isn't even an accomplishment these days. Accuracy-wise, Drew Brees is completing nearly 80% of his passes at times. Even last night, he was 18 of 28. Through the month of November, 72%. Dak Prescott, 64. And let's be brutally honest here. If it wasn't for a late interception by Jordan Lewis, that wouldn't be a Cowboys win. Because Dak Prescott had the ball security issues that have plagued him his whole career. He literally lathers his gloves in butter. So let's take this Cowboys picture and move forward, okay? They go into the offseason, maybe they make the playoffs, maybe they win a game, or at most 2. Wow, great. They then are probably going to extend Jason Garrett, who's going to clap his way to an extension. They're probably going to give Dak Prescott some big-time money, and this Cowboys franchise settles for mediocrity again. Meanwhile, the Eagles, who have had a full year with their recent offensive coordinator, as I've said a million times on this show, the quarterback to offensive coordinator relationship is the most important on the team, and it hasn't been there this season because Wentz had the entire offseason missing. The Eagles will be fully healthy. Carson Wentz in year 2 of rehabbing his ACL. With their cornerstone players of Zach Ertz, Fletcher Cox, Lane Johnson, Jason Kelce, Alshon Jeffrey, all coming back. They're going to have a healed secondary. And some relatively impressive draft assets, all things considered. Who do you really think is going to be in a better position to win the NFC East next year? Philadelphia or Dallas? Because if the answer is Dallas, I genuinely feel that's wrong. And this isn't homer bias, this isn't any kind of bias. You know me, I stay as neutral as I can. I don't view myself as a fan. I'm dropping bars like Stan, probably. But this team is far more positioned because they've got the cornerstones locked down. Yeah, they're in a bit of cap trouble, but it's erasable. It's not the end of the world. I mean, 13 million, I believe, is somehow linked to Nick Foles, and you've got Jason Peters, who probably won't be back next year. The Eagles will find their way around it. But last night didn't tell me, well, season over, Dallas makes the playoffs, well, that's fine. There's no recency bias. This isn't negativity. I don't think the Eagles will. If the Eagles made the playoffs, is it really a success on their part, or is it a failure on everyone else on the NFC East? If you're Washington, who, I mean, maybe Washington's a bad example because they have lost Alex Smith, but any other team in the NFC East, let's be brutally honest, will look at that division come week 17 and go, wow, we let that Eagles team, who choked to Carolina, who choked to Tennessee, who laid an absolute egg against the Saints, who lose to Dallas, we let them win? We let Nick Foles for 2 games? We let Carson Wentz, who has been playing far closer to his rookie form, win? We let that secondary of guys, we let Dexter McDougal win? That's not of course it'll be a team achievement, but the responsibility on, I would say if you were to split that between the Eagles and the rest of the NFC East failing, it's 50-50 at best, let's be brutally honest. The Eagles didn't go out and dominate from week 1. They didn't go out and wreck the league like a Kansas City or a New Orleans or whoever it may be, the LA Rams or Houston at this point. And now they've got a first place schedule. And now they've got to face the Rams. And now they've got to face the Texans and Dallas and week 17 in Washington. That's a tough stretch. And this Eagles team has burned away every chance they've had to right the wrongs of this season. Every time they've had a shot at redemption, blown it away. Didn't want to know. And that's fine. Next year, I think the Eagles will come back much better, much stronger. I'm not saying forget this season, look forward to next year already. What I am saying is, fans should not be bitterly disappointed if after this game, or after Monday night, they don't make the playoffs. If they do lose to Washington. Not that we should ever accept losing as some sort of miraculous formula that's going to, well, okay, we lost, it's alright. That's not the Philadelphia way, I know that. But there shouldn't be a distaste, because that's what we've become used to this season. That's who this team is this season. Next year, sure, see how that relationship lasts with that rugby lad. See how that goes on, moving on. But, you know, when I'm over there beasting myself up at age 15, sounding like a teenage girl, then we'll see. I don't think it's that premature to start looking ahead to the long-term future. This team, if you were to compare the Eagles, the Giants, the Redskins, and the Cowboys, and say 5-year plan, who's going to win the NFC East the most? It is certainly not the Giants just yet. It probably isn't Washington. I really don't think it's Dallas, who for the life of me struggle with everything. Like, it doesn't matter what they do. Dak Prescott is Brock Osweiler. I won't be told otherwise. And if they're going to pay him an expensive contract, if they're going to pay Jason Garrett, please bring Scott Linehan back in his 4 plays that he runs every game. Then yeah, I mean, what's to worry about? The Eagles won a Super Bowl. They struggled to keep that culture alive. Dallas goes out and does a thing. It doesn't matter. It's not that deep. This Eagles team had a massive weight of responsibility, and they were overshadowed at injuries at every key position imaginable. I don't think any team had it worse. And then you've got all of the rest of the drama that comes with it. Just relax. Hey, if the Eagles make the playoffs, brilliant. But let's not go in expecting greatness. Like, as I said, I saw Elliot Shaw-Parks getting absolutely trashed on Twitter for saying that, well, season's all but done, Eagles have a long way to go, for a so-called recency bias. Now, I am not one to go and defend ESP, because as much as I respect his game, I respect his credentialing, a lot of what he does is based off of hype. He puts things in a vacuum, he lets angry Twitter people just go, oh, you're wrong, and they retweet, and he gets famous, and he hashtags emojis, and I don't care if it's ironic. Why? Like, there's no point. We're not talking about that. We're fine. But top 5 slideshows, you can go and view them over at 94. No, we're not going there. But I genuinely think in that situation, he shouldn't have been attacked. That's not a recency bias. That's a genuine outlook on what this team is moving forward. I don't think they've been playing playoff football. They don't play like a playoff contender. They're not as intimidating as a playoff contender. Any team that comes into a playoff matchup and sees that Eagles team limping out onto the field is not going to go, ooh, and start quaking in their boots. It'll be a David Brent scenario going, ooh, you're hard. That'll be it. They've talked too much. They've walked too little. The season is what it is. If they can get to .500 on the year, fantastic. Even that at this point still could be a stretch. Only time will tell. If they go out and they win out and they make the playoffs, wonderful. But let's not just start playing the 1975 just yet if they do lose. Let's not start playing Slipknot if they miss the playoffs. Because the way this season has gone, anything other than that result would be the shock. Anyway, guys, if you are new around here, as I said before, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. There's 2, in case you aren't aware. So we've got one on YouTube, which is big and red, and that just, of course, subscribes you to our YouTube channel. We want to try and hit 5,000 by the end of the year. And while we're on that note, just a massive, massive thank you as well, because some of you will know, I recently put out a video on Madden 19, starting a franchise mode with the Eagles. Excuse my voice, I've been battling the same cough for about 4 months now. And I get through about 3 packs of cough sweets a week. I need to go to a doctor, but, you know, the grind calls. And it actually makes me sound a little less like a teenage girl. And a bit... Okay, it doesn't, because now conveniently the Husker's gone the minute I reference that. So brilliant. But the Madden series, it's something I've wanted to do for a while. Because I've been writing about the Eagles for close to 5 years now. And as much as I love that with all of my heart, that I've always got this drive to be bigger and better and to be what's next. And I'd always wanted to dip my toes into that sort of thing, but never really knew like why or how I had the platform to, and I knew it would just kind of sink under the radar. So now to have 4,400 of you subscribe to this channel and 700 of you watch that video, like, damn, I just want it to be funny, I want it to be different, make a few laughs, will be totally different to any other Madden series out there. But I wasn't expecting that kind of reaction. And just thank you so much if you've watched it. If you haven't, it's on the channel. But the second subscribe button is taking you directly to iTunes. So if you've got an Apple product, whether it's an iPad or a phone or a computer or what have you, hit that subscribe button. And what that will do is freely subscribe you to our podcast so you get it every single time it's uploaded, instantly, for free, downloaded to your device. It takes 2 seconds and it genuinely is the best way to support what we do. So if you're watching it on YouTube, hit that subscribe button as well, because that's the one that's really going to help this podcast grow. So just thank you so much for all of your support. We've now actually passed 500,000 views on YouTube, which is crazy. Like, that's absolutely crazy. And that wouldn't be possible without you. And we just want to build the best community on the internet for Philadelphia fans, on our website, on our YouTube page, on the podcast. Like, that's our aim. We just want to give everything we've got for you. And knowing you're enjoying that, this makes it so much better. And I'm genuinely so thankful for... I promised myself I wasn't going to get soppy until the Christmas special, and I've let myself down. I'm disappointed. I'm very sorry. But the second thing we're going to talk about is something that's only just come up today, and that was that there was an anonymous source. Okay, it was one of those things where Josina Anderson, very good writer, extremely talented at ESPN, spoke to an anonymous source on the Eagles who gave 3 reasons why the team isn't as successful as it was last year. His responses were the lack of a run game, too many targets to Zach Ertz, and a lack of cohesion or the camaraderie being a bit different. Now, I've got a very good hunch as to who that source was, and it doesn't take too much to look into and figure it out either. I'm not going to name him in case that hunch is wrong, and I'm not here to point fingers because that's not the point of the article. But if we were to examine all 3 of those points, the lack of camaraderie, I've been hammering that home for about, 9 weeks on this podcast now? That this team just doesn't look the same? We've had Malcolm Jenkins talk about it, we've had Jason Kelsey talk about it. I've spoken about it, as I say, for about a month minimum, before the season as well, because... take everything else away, I've hammered this point home also, that there's no more important relationship on a team than that of a quarterback and an offensive coordinator. Frank Reich went to the Colts. They promoted Mike Groh, who spent the entire offseason working with Nick Foles as his QB1. Carson Wentz comes back in. He's got to adjust to an offensive coordinator, adjust to a slightly different way of doing things. He's got to get lapped back up with his receivers. And the thing is, you can look at it any way you want, but if you work with someone for a year, and then they go away for a month on holiday, and then you get used to a new manager, got a different way of doing things, everything's, maybe the timing's different, maybe you've got to start a bit earlier, do a task a bit sooner, do it differently. Some of the values and morals that you have are going to alter slightly. So Wentz comes back in, off his month holiday, and the employees just are a little bit weird. They're not sure what to expect. And you can totally see that. That's why that leads us to directly onto point number 2, why Zach Ertz is getting so many targets. Because he doesn't have that chemistry back yet. Nick Foles spent the better part of a year with that team. If you take, let's say week 14 to the Super Bowl, then the entire offseason. That's pretty much a full season, right? That's fine. But the players get used to where he places the ball. They get used to the offensive running, to his cadence, to the timing, to his preferences, to his tendencies, anything. Anything subtle like his eye movement. How long does he hold a safety for? Is he going to take a check down? Should I be creating more space? Do I have to adjust at the end of my routes now? It's all the same. All the same kettle of fish. And you partner that with the fact that Wentz is still recovering from an ACL injury. You partner that with, you can see there's rookie errors coming out where he's trying to do too much with the ball. His footwork is now stagnant inside the pocket. He's staring down receivers. And he's just taking checkdowns with Zach Ertz because they're there. And other routes aren't because receivers aren't creating separation. And point 3 was the run game, which doesn't really need any conversation at this point. It really doesn't. I'm really happy for Josh Adams. We said that on Monday's show, that he got to have the breakout game and he's going to carry this backfield moving forward. I still think the Eagles are going to look for another back in the offseason, probably a rookie. But let's be honest, that was a really good breakout for him. Too little too late though. You've literally locked the door after the horse has ran out and got run over by a truck. It's too late, you can't leave it to that point in the season to go, oh, I know, let's run the ball. Like I said in that offensive meeting clip not too long ago. There is absolutely validity to what that source is saying. The biggest part, though, was obviously Zach Ertz and how those targets are somewhat marginalising the offence and taking them away. I'll get the exact quote up, just so in case you haven't read it, you can hear what I'm on about. According to the article from Josina Anderson, says, I feel like we're over-targeting Zach Ertz. Right now, Zach Ertz leads the team in targets with 111, and even though he's catching 76% of those, the source says that he feels like it's disrupting the kind of rhythm with everybody else getting into a groove on offense. Even though Zach Ertz right now is on pace to have the most receptions in NFL history in a single season for a tight end. Absolutely. Absolutely right. The other aspect of that, though, however, let's play devil's advocate here and say, hey, do you know what? There's probably a reason for that. If they didn't have Zach Ertz, this offense would be a lot more unproductive. The red zone efficiency for this team has dipped tremendously. Last year, the Eagles scored touchdowns on 64% of their drives. This year, that number is down to 55%. Since 2017, Zach Ertz has scored 14 red zone touchdowns, leading the NFL. He leads the Eagles with 6 touchdowns. All 6 have come inside the 20. That wasn't a dirty... You take your mind off that. That's not a dirty pun, alright? Come on, we're having a serious conversation. Zach Ertz inside the red zone has been a monumental asset. The problem is the Eagles aren't getting to the red zone. Is that because they're taking checkdowns? Is that because of scripting? I don't know. But let's not overlook the fact that this has got two... It's a double-edged sword. On one end, you've got Zach Ertz having a historic season. On the other, if Wentz wasn't targeting him every other play, he wouldn't be having that historic season. But why is he targeting him every other play? Look around you at all these other factors that we've just spoken about. The thing is that you start on one point with this Eagles team, you may have realised by now, and you end up within 5 minutes on the completely other side of the universe. You start talking about how a quarterback and offensive coordinator relationship is important. Within 3 minutes, you're talking about how Elon Musk should be playing tight end. Like, there is so many variables at every position. If we took at cornerbacks, Ronald Darby had a bad year, gets injured. I would argue, and I hate to be that guy, but if you look at Cravon LeBlanc, I would say he had a better game against the Giants than Ronald Darby had in the game before his injury. I would say that Jalen Mills, who got injured... Alright, okay, so Chandler Sullivan was nowhere near as good. But Jalen Mills, Sidney Jones, all of these other cornerbacks, have they really been that amazing? What about the linebackers? Hicks and Bradham, great year. Not a single pick for either of them, because that's a thing now. 2 of the most complete coverage linebackers in the NFL. Struggling to do much of anything. I mean, they're making tackles, they're consistent, it's very under the radar, they're nowhere near as explosive. Defensive line, silent, not heard a word from them most of the year, apart from Michael Bennett and Fletcher Cox, both of whom have had fantastic years. Offensive line, atrocious up until about a week ago. Tight ends, they should be using Dallas Goedert more. They went through like 4 weeks where they just didn't use him and would rather make Josh Perkins play quarterback. Like, they'll just have Josh Perkins go, nah, let's make Josh Perkins our kicker and Dallas Goedert can have a bath. It's really strange. Quarterback has got its own controversy with obviously Carson Wentz and Nick Foles and the fact that Wentz had to miss 2 games and then they beat the Falcons and then the offense had to be reshuffled around. There are so many... the run game does not even need a start. Don't get me started on Wendelis of Small Woodington. There's just too much with this team. Forget the 3 points. If it's got to a stage where the source, if who I think it is, who is very normally, subjectively quiet to the media, is going out of his way and pretty much throwing those areas of the team under the bus, then that says all you need to know. There's a frustration within that locker room that things aren't going the way they are. Everyone's pointing fingers at everyone because there is a lack of accountability. And that is what it comes down to. That is my biggest pet peeve with this team right now. They talk about it every week. It's like Doug Peterson bingo. You play starting fast, accountability, gosh, darn, and 1 game at a time. You get a full house every week. It's not even a joke. Write them down, next press conference. But the thing is that they speak about accountability and, we've got to look ourselves in the mirror. We've got to save the season. We've got to look at who we are, how we're playing. The tackling never changes. The quarterback's making the same problems. The receivers aren't separating. The linemen aren't blocking until last week. The running backs aren't running. The game plan's the same. The scripting doesn't work in the first quarter. They've got 21 first quarter points through 11 games. From top to bottom, something's not right. And everyone pointing at everyone else isn't working. There are significant holes, significant problems, significant injuries all over this roster. And that is why, going back to our first topic, again, yes, there's life in this team. Yes, they're going to fight. Yes, they're underdogs. And they may well win out. They may even beat the Redskins and the Cowboys. They may even beat the Rams. But there are so many factors going into this team. It's hard to really put a finger on who's the problem. We can't put it on Doug Peterson. I think that's unfair. You can't put it on anyone because it's solely unfair. Everyone is equally accountable, and that's the biggest problem. Again, guys, if you're new around here, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. Again, 2 of them is what you need to watch out for. If you're on Spreaker or anything like that, there is a link in the description. If you're on YouTube, you've got the big red one for YouTube. We're trying to get a few uploads a week out now. You want 1 Madden video, 1 Outside Insider, 1 Film Room, 1 O&B podcast if any of you guys are Flyers fans, maybe a second Outside Inside. That's 5 videos a week on top of everything else I'm doing as well. So just hit that subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. Make my Christmas. It would be amazing. So if you can do that, that'd be great. And then you've got the blue one, which is for the podcast. That would be equally very, very nice of you. And I couldn't tell you how much I appreciate it. So we've got a couple more features left on this show. One of them is the inevitable thank you next. Another one, for some reason, again, this is just becoming a thing now, where I talk about my former work employees from my life growing up in a shop. Several shops, actually. And actually, that sounds like I was raised in a shop, but I wasn't. I mean, my first job was in a retail store. Just raised behind, like, clothes rails and changing rooms. That's really strange. But yeah, let's have a chat, shall we? Let's talk about my former DIY store employee stories. I'm going to introduce you to... I say that like he's here, thank God he's not. But there's a former employee that on my very first day, okay, I started that. Again, DIY store. I was looking at this as a part-time job. It's somewhere for me to just, make that bread while I can fund what I do on the side, which at the time was starting Philly Sports Network. In fact, I remember starting that job, and I remember being at the till, and I got a tweet through, like a DM from someone saying that there was going to be a big trade happening, and Sam Bradford was involved. And I sprinted home so fast. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, that day I finished work, I ran home, and I got there and found out that obviously the big Sam Bradford trade happened. And so that was, the convenient time frame of where this was all going on, just for some context. But my first day at that job, someone comes up to me, and he works there, and he looked like, the only way I can describe it is if you've seen The Human Centipede 2, he looked like the villain from that. The weird one. Well, I mean, it's human, they're all weird, but you know what I'm saying. And he comes up to me, and he goes, hello, like, that voice. And I'm not going to say his name, but it'll go, my name, he'll go, oh, hello, I'm, and then his name. I've got to think of a dodgy name now. Hello, I'm Ian. Okay. And I was like, oh, hey Ian, I'm Liam, nice to meet you. And he went, I was in a car crash 7 years ago. And I literally, like, what do you do in that situation? Like, what do you say? What do you say? That's your first line of dialogue. Like, it's your first day at work. And someone comes up to you at 9 a.m. and goes, hello, I was in a car crash 7 years ago. Like, what? What do I say? And I was like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. He goes, yeah, I've got a sack of fluid in my back now. And it's so hard not laugh, but just the awkwardness of the situation. And I very rapidly learned that he was a pivotal employee in the downfall of that store. And you all need to be aware of his existence. So, that same day, I remember I was putting some timber or wood into some racking, which for my little baby arms, although I have been to the gym 3 times in a row now, and just for context, I broke a mug today. I don't know what that's got to do with anything, but I literally was washing up, and I went to pull the towel out of the mug I was drying, and the handle fell off. And I don't know my own strength. I'm literally the Hulk, and I won't be told otherwise. But back onto conversation, which was something about the dodgy employee. What was I talking about? Yeah, the dodgy employee. Anyway, yeah, later in the day, I was putting timber in the racks, and there's a tannoy message, and he goes, Oh, this is a customer announcement, a colleague announcement. Can Liam please come to the front desk, please? Thank you. Hangs up the phone. So I'm like, me? Well, one, he knows my name. Two, okay, sure, yeah, why not? So I go to the front desk, and he goes, hi, Liam. Can you move these bags from till 1 to till 2, please? And there was a box of shopping bags. Like, it's not that hard. And I realised that's why he told me he was in a car accident, because he doesn't want to lift anything or do any kind of remote work. And that man will now be a poignant feature in this podcast moving forward, because he is just absolutely iconic in every sense of the word. I'll give you one more while we're here, because this topic is... Thing is, like, this has been such a quiet week for the Eagles. There's only so much we can talk about, because we've already done one show and addressed all the big elephants in the room, right? So if you're thinking this is nothing Eagles related, and you haven't listened to Monday's show, go back and listen to that one, because that's where we break down all the X's and O's. There's a film room on the YouTube channel. There's everything about that game on Monday, which is why this one's a little bit of a funny one. And I remember I was with my ex-girlfriend, and she came to pick me up after work, and he'd never met her before. And she just comes up to the till, and I was on the other one serving a customer, and he walks up to her, doesn't say a word. This human centipede-looking chicken nugget walks up to her, gets his phone out, and shows it. And I don't know what he's showing her. I'm like, what's he doing? And I just hear her go, oh, that's nice. And then by this point, I've like deserted the customer and just walked over, because I'm obviously a bit defensive. And I just hear him going, yes, this is me at a car show, sat in a Mercedes-Benz. Do you like it? And I was like, oh dear, just please leave her alone. Please, because any credibility I've got with this girl is going through the floor, and I don't want to talk about the situation again. But there we are. He will now be a key point in this podcast. I feel like it has to be. We've only just scratched the surface with these stories, by the way, so I hope you're going to stick around and wait for them. But this does mean we're now on our final feature of the day. I hear you all say. I mean, that wasn't some sort of dodgy voice. We're trying to keep it all upset and emotional. Of course, the podcast is going to come to an end. But before we do, we've got some questions to get through. So, I asked you guys on YouTube and Twitter for your questions, and about -6 of you responded, because there is nothing to talk about. Which is where, in my opinion, the best content creators come out and do their thing. That's why I love Teron Davenport. That's why I love a variety, like Mike Kay is another great guy. Mike, even, a lot of people don't like him, but Matt Lombardo was another fantastic writer in these situations. These are where the best guys come up and they hit the home runs and they don't rest on hot takes. So, after a little bit of pressing, we did it on YouTube as well, we have got some questions for you. So, today's episode of Thank You Next, which does not have a little double meaning, because I'm definitely not in my feelings after that 1975. Should we just have a podcast on my love life? Would that be easier? I make so many subtle references to it. We might as well at this point. Well, maybe next week. So the first question... Thank you next, Joey B. Why aren't the Eagles using Shelton Gibson with his speed to stretch the field, at least until Mike Wallace comes back from surgery? Great question. I genuinely feel like they tried to, and he couldn't deliver. He struggled to separate the majority of times from what I saw on the E22. Now, he's not a bad receiver. He made some big catches, but had the yips... Oh, that's an American term, isn't it? Had the yips before the season. He had some real struggles with drop passes. And when he settled down, he was great, but he struggles to get off the line. And I think where a lot of this offense relies on timing, speed's fantastic, but if you can't get off the line to use it, you're not going to get very far. So that may be why, and that could also be what sparked the Golden Tate trade. Thank you. Next, Angry Eagles fan on YouTube asks, with the Eagles 2 games behind the Cowboys, do we have to win out for a chance to make the playoffs? No, we do not. I say we like I'm involved in that, like I have no pivotal role to play. And here is the reason why. I think the Cowboys have a very good chance of at least dropping 1 game to the Colts. At least. They may, if they lose to the Eagles as well, in a best case scenario, that's 2 they lose. The Eagles can afford to drop 1 in that spot, then it'll come down to a tiebreaker. I think that'll be the way they go. They'll get through on a tiebreak. It would not surprise me in the slightest if the Eagles can come through and do that. So that would be the way that this team makes the playoffs. If you're hearing it here first, how the Eagles make the playoffs, they drop 1 to the Rams, they beat the Texans, the Redskins, the Cowboys drop 1 to the Colts, the Cowboys drop 1 to the Eagles, and the Eagles go through on a tiebreak. Thank you, next, XX4XX, thank you, next, X4XX. So how do we scheme up an offense to beat a D that has 2 linebackers that seem to be everywhere at once? and because we're going to need to do that soon, and Sean Payton couldn't do it, can Doug, and then can he call Frank and tell him how to do it next week? Very big question. I completely agree. I think that those Washington linebackers are menaces, and I was going to do a film room on this. I kind of got sucked into making Nick Foles go under the Titanic in that video, but honestly, it's a difficult one. The only way they're going to do it is by focusing on routes that are down the sideline. Zach Ertz is not going to be a pivotal part in that game. I really don't think he will. They've got to try and creatively use their tight ends. They've got Richard Rodgers back, which means they should be able to free up Dallas Goedert and Ertz on some interesting routes, maybe even out of the backfield, maybe at wide receiver. Just move this offense around. You can't contest the middle of the field, because with Wentz's decision making right now, with the way he's staring down receivers, I think it's too easy. And I think those Redskins linebackers, who have been absolutely brilliant all year long, are going to make the Eagles pay. They've been a key part of the run defense machine for Washington. They've been a key part in intercepting passes, and I can see that continuing on Monday night. So that would be my game plan. Just get the ball outside. Don't even think about the middle of the field. You've got to focus all that attention outside. But we're not done yet. We did get some question marks in from you guys on Twitter as well. So we're going to get to those questions right now. Thank you. Next, Mark OJ88. Assuming we come out with a strong run game, how many touches and yards do we think Josh Adams gets against the Redskins? Great question. I mean, the 22 carry load is a bit much. They don't want to do it that badly. I think in an ideal world, they want to keep it at 16. As I said before, that was the number last year. No back had more than 16, other than LeGarrette Blount once. 16 is the magic number. I think the rest of the backs will pick up the slack there, so Smallwood and Clement. And then obviously you've got the screens and stuff as well. So I would say 16 carries, maybe a few receptions, but that will be where I'm looking at. Thank you. Next, Daniel Ratajak. By the way, I did reply to your email, man. I'm not sure if you've got it yet. Please keep an eye out for that one. Which players on offense and defense need to have a huge game on Monday, and why? Firstly, Carson Wentz, because those linebackers are absolutely punishing, and the errors he's been making, I'm not sure they'll be able to do and get away with against the Redskins. Secondly, I want to say Alshon Jeffrey. I think Zach Ertz, as we alluded to earlier, has been such a focal point in this offense that Jeffrey's value is minimised. Same with Nelson Aguilar. We need Alshon Jeffrey to really start terrorising defences and let Wentz throw a 50-50 ball. I can't name one, other than that one third down conversion a couple weeks ago. Wentz hasn't been throwing them. He hasn't been contesting with Alshon. So that would be my names to watch on offense. Defense, obviously you're going to have the cornerbacks, like all of them, regardless who plays. If they're back from injury, then, well, they're probably going to be less than 100%. If they're not, it's the backups once again. So Malcolm Jenkins is going to have to step up and be the leader again. Those are the guys I'm looking for. Chad Whitechurch says, I got nothing, and I don't blame you, because there hasn't been anything going on this week. So instead, we've had a podcast filled with the 1975 references, which has spammed my Twitter, and the occasional rant about Dak Prescott. And finally, a little tweet from Derek Bobb, who's a writer at Philly Sports Network, one of our Flyers guys, tremendous writer. Says, all I saw in this tweet was shoot me your birds, and he sends a gif of someone flipping the bird. And to make it work, I mean, you know, Derek is a Cowboys fan, so he's not going to like this podcast too much. I'm sorry, Derek. It's okay. But if we're talking about shooting me birds, in England that would mean you're shooting me women, and that would just end even worse because I can't talk to them. But that's another story for another podcast. On that note, while Derek is in my mentions, the little flirty romantic, we are going to have a very special podcast in December with all of your favourite Philly Sports Network writers. So myself, Derek Bobb, Jamie Basco, who covers the Flyers, Alex Baker, going to have Johnny Haller in here as well, Jay Smoot, who's been helping me grind out this Eagles coverage this year. We're going to have a bunch of guys, all your favourite. I want to try and get Tyler Zulian as well, because I love that man and how well he's been doing at 97.5 The Fanatic. But we're going to have Tim Sullivan and Austin Mitchell, the guys who have started the Drink and Fight podcast here on Philly Sports Network. They're in. Timothy Lovingeth as well, our lead Philadelphia Union writer. He's going to be on. Brendan Pettigrew, John Gove, Simon Rowan, Morgan Burkett. We've got all the big names who make up Philly Sports Network. If you're not on phillysportsnetwork.com, make sure you are. But we're going to have all of our writers on, just reviewing a year in Philadelphia sports, talking it up, having fun, talking about my love life probably, having a few tears, and thanking you all again. But before we do get to the big emotional podcast. Just thank you so much for everything, guys. Like, it really does mean the world to me. If you are new around here, hit the subscribe buttons. That's the only way these podcasts are going to grow, and they have been. And I love this little community that we're forming. Also, tweet me. Just send me a tweet at Liam Jenkins 21. Get me out of my feelings. Just send me a picture of you listening to the show, or a GIF or a meme. Memes are the best. Like, send me a meme about this show and we'll mention it next week. I want that to be a thing. Like, as many memes as you can about me or the Outside Insider show. Tweet me at Liam Jenkins 21 or at Philadelphia SN. You can get them on. But from the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening. We'll see you next week for another episode of the Outside Insider, where the Eagles may or may not be still alive